Hello class, welcome to today's topic, which is going to be about tips and tricks essential in excelling in your IELTS listening tests. Well, today's video is going to be a little bit different. This is because I'm going to be reading directly from a book and explaining each point one by one. This is to ensure that each tip and trick is well understood by everyone. Well, let us get right into it. So the first thing, read questions and fully understand the context of the questions before audio begins. So before the listening audio begins, you're usually given like 1 minute and you're told to read through the questions. Please do not ignore this time or use it to gaze out of the exam. Please go through that section of the questions, read through the questions and understand the context of the questions. If you can have a rough idea what this paragraph is saying and the answers expected. What do I mean by the answers expected? This means like if you see dash AM, this means that you are expecting a time like 7 a.m., 8 a.m. If you see dash, maybe something like dash school, maybe you're expecting the name of the school, you're expecting the address of the school, something like that. Please read through the questions so as to ensure you understand the context of that paragraph and you also anticipate the kind of answer you are going to be expected to give. This time is crucial. Yes. So the next tip or trick is going to be, when audio begins, keep an eye on your question, the question you're answering and the immediate question coming. At times, the two questions are interchanged. When unfortunately you miss one answer, you can catch up on the next. What do I mean by this? I mean, for example, you are in question 7. There's question 7 and 8, yes? So you should read that question 7 and the answer immediately and the question immediately after, which is question 8. So you know that what question 7 is talking about, what question 8 is talking about. This is to ensure that in case by bad luck you miss question 7 during the audio, you are going to realize that you've already missed question 7 and now you're anticipating for the answer of question 8. Trust me, this happens a lot, especially during your first practice tests. You're going to realize, oh my god, I have question 7 has already passed me, now we're in question 8. If you didn't know what question 8 was, trust me, the audio is going to surpass question 8, now you're in question 9. You know? So please always ensure that you know question 7 and question 8, or one question and the question right after. This is to ensure that in case you miss that question, you're going to know that you've already proceeded to the next question and you're not going to be confused. Because trust me, once you miss one question and you get disoriented, the whole audio is going to pass you by. Because the first thing you're going to do is panic. And once you panic in the listening test, it's over for you until that whole section is over. Yes. Another thing is that sometimes, though not very often, you can realize that, for example, it's question 9 and 10. Yes, you realize that the way a certain sentence has been phrased, the answer to question 10 comes before question 9, but not in a very huge time span. the answer is in that sentence of both question 10 and question 9. So once you listen to that audio, then you can you can figure out the answer to question 10 and also question 9. Sometimes they're usually in a very short time span, or just in the same, like for example, the next 2 lines are answers of number 9 and 10. So if you're not keen, you might miss those answers. So it's very important to know at least this question and the next question. That is very important. Okay, our next tip and trick. When answering a question, always pay attention to the keyword just before the question gap or in the general question. What does this mean? I think I've already talked about this slightly, but I'm going to repeat. For example, you should take note of your question gap. Is it in the middle of the sentence? And what comes right before or right after that question gap? Is it an address? Are you expecting an address? Are you expecting a noun, a pronoun, name of a place, name of a city, name of a person? Like, reading that question and understanding its context always gives you an idea of the answer you are expecting. And the 2 words before and after a question gap always gives you a rough idea if you are expecting maybe if the answer is a name, if it's a telephone number, if it's an address, things like that. So it all goes back to our number 1 point, which is always understand the context of your question. This is going to help you a lot. Okay, next. Beware of direction in mapping questions. And at this point, there are also 3 sub-points, which are: beware of starting point because you might miss it, and when you miss it, you are done. Remember directions, e.g. east, west, north, south, left, right. Be knowledgeable on general idea of diagram and process. So this tip and trick is directly related to a mapping question. Guys, especially in mapping, please make sure to practice mapping questions, because sometimes mapping questions can be a bit tricky. Why is this? This is because in a mapping question or in a process type of question or diagram type of question, once you miss a certain direction, that is all for you, my dear. Especially if you miss the starting point, that is if it is direction kind of question, type of question. If you miss the starting point, that is all for you. You are done, because then you will not know what the whole audio is talking about. For example, you have been presented with a question type, and this question type is about direction. I'm sure you're going to encounter this during your practice tests. Is usually, for example, you're given a certain starting point, and then from there you're given directions to go maybe to the cafe, to the washrooms, to the library, something like that. It's just directions. So number 1, before even the audio begins, be knowledgeable of that diagram or process or whatever. Be knowledgeable. Just peruse through the questions in that diagram, talking about that diagram or process. Have a general know-how. Like, don't just wait for the audio to begin and then that's when you want to start like talking about, oh, what is this process all about or diagram all about. First, before the audio begins, look through the diagram, have a general idea. Obviously, you can't know everything or everything they're going to be talking about in the audio, but at least have a general idea what this diagram is all about or what this structure is all about. And then the most important part is the starting point. Once you miss the starting point, that whole section is over, because you will not know what the audio is talking about. You won't know where the audio is at. You won't know which question the audio is talking about. So first peruse through the questions and then be very keen when the audio is beginning. They usually talk about the starting point. They say something like, we are starting at the library, and the library is usually named, for example, library. If it's on a computer, put your hand on the library. Or if it's in a piece of paper, put your hand on the library. From there, by then you're already very knowledgeable of the compass directions, which are usually north, south, east, and west. And then right and left. Please do not confuse these cardinal points, because once you do, if they talk about the right and you don't know where the right is, you go to the left, then that is all for you. So mapping questions are the type of question types that really need practicing, because if you don't practice, then you're not going to be well versed with the directional points, with how the questions are usually directed or framed. Yeah, so something to note: practice so much on direction and mapping type of questions. Yes. Next point. Polish writing or typing speed. Practice with your exam mode always. No distractions during exam. Make it a true mock exam. What does this mean? This means that each time you are doing your practice tests, always treat that practice test just like you would treat a the actual exam. This is by only using your booked exam style in practicing. If you booked as a paper-based exam, only practice with paper-based. If you booked with computer-based, only practice with computer-based. Type down your answers if it's computer-based. Write down your answers if it is paper-based. Another thing, ensure that you do not get distracted during the exam. What does this mean? You might see your friend coughing. You look away. Once you look away in the exam room in listening, it's over, because the audio is going to pass you right by. Remember, I said this audio is not going to be repeated. It's only played once. So once a certain information passes you, that is all for you. Please, no distractions. Or I don't know, you keep on changing your posture. By the time you're changing your posture, a certain question has already passed you. So during your practice test, practice with your exam mode, practice your posture, practice being focused the whole 30 minutes. Yes. Treat it just like a real exam. Treat all your mock tests as real exams. Go sit down in a private area and carry out your tests. Okay. Remember, I said the marks you're getting in your mock tests are usually in the same range that your real exam is going to be towards the days of your exam. So just treat it as your real exam. Okay. The next point is about level of intensity of the questions throughout your listening test. So, as I said, there are usually 4 sections in the listening test. So, in these 4 sections, I had previously said that intensity increases as the test goes on. The first part is usually a bit easy, mostly a telephone conversation. Yeah, mostly it's telephone conversations or table completion. So usually easy, and the level of intensity usually increases gradually. But I'm not saying that the last part of the listening exam is harder. I'm just saying it's hard. I'm just saying it's a bit not as easy as the first part. So what does this mean? Always make sure that the first part of the listening exam you've scored everything, or you've scored the highest. Like always ace in the easiest part, in the first part of the exam, so that maybe by bad luck the last part becomes a little bit tricky for you. You fail at least maybe some 2 questions, 3 or 4 or 5, but you've already aced these other parts, maybe section 1, section 2, section 1 and section 2. Then even if you stumble a bit in section 3 and 4, it can be balanced out by part 1 and part 2, because those are the easier parts. But I'm not saying section 3 and 4 are hard. I'm just saying that please make part 1 and part 2 your strongholds. And this, you're going to observe this in your practice tests and take note of them. Take note of maybe the parts you find a little bit hard, the parts you find a little bit easier, and maximize on your easier parts and also work on your harder parts. Yes. Okay, let us talk about section 4 of the listening part. In this section, as I said, it's a little bit trickier than the other sections. Why is this? I usually say, per my observation, that the last section of the listening part is hard. This is because the questions are usually is following each other, the correct the correct way to put it, that there's no much time between one question and the other question. This usually requires you to be very fast in typing or writing, so that you can finish typing or writing and still get to the next question, because the information from one question to the next question is usually following each other in a very short time span. You cannot compare the time span between one question and the next question in section 1 and section 2 with the time span in question 3 and question 4, especially in section 4. Sorry, I called them questions. In section 4. So question 4, the trick of question 4 is typing speed and the ability to type or write while still keenly listening to the audio and understanding the context of the audio and still knowing the 2 consecutive questions following each other. What does this mean? For example, the audio is going on at this moment. The answer to question 6 has already been mentioned. So you are writing down question 6. But do not, as you're writing down the answer to question 6, do not forget to still listen to the audio and still take note of the type of answer you are expecting for question 7 and 8. Do you get what I mean? Because by the time you're finishing to write, sometimes they've already begun talking about question 7. And if you're not keen, you're going to pass question 7, and now they're already talking about question 8. By the time you look up, they're already talking about question 9. So if you're not keen and you're not fast in writing and typing, section 3 and 4 are going to be a bit tricky. This is because compared to section 1 and 2, section 1 is usually something like they've already mentioned the answer to question 1. You write it down. They talk, and then they talk for about maybe a minute or 2, and then they mention the answer to question 2. You write it down. So if you still go with that mentality to section 3 and 4, you're probably going to flop. So it's very important to note that the level of intensity of the questions increases as the audio goes on. So do not be the way you're going to treat part 1, do not the way you're going to treat part 4 of the exam. Yes. So on to our next tip stroke trick. Okay. Mostly there's a pronunciation question, e.g. they say a word that isn't easily common stroke relatable, e.g. a name, an address, a telephone number, a place, etc. They usually spell this name or address or whichever it is out, and you're supposed to write it down. Write it down very fast. You can easily miss it. So what does this mean? As I said previously, it is important to note the type of answer you are anticipating. And sometimes these answers can be a name or a place or a certain town. And most times these names or towns or an address can be easily misunderstood. So mostly in this test, these names or address or telephone numbers are usually spelled out. For example, they've mentioned a name like Laura. Yes? So they say something like Laura Mudeu. So what they're going to do, they're going to spell it out. Most times, the one who's if it's a conversation in the audio, the other party in that conversation is going to say, can you please spell it out for me? So they spell it out. They say something like Laura-Mudheu, Laura Mudheu. So it is your job to, if you've already noted this is something that needs to be spelled out, the minute they begin spelling out, please write as fast as possible, or if it's typing, type as fast as possible, because it's very easy to miss out a letter or a number in this type of question. So this, okay, you're going to get used to this as you practice, but I'm just saying, always type it down very fast, because it's once you miss a letter, that is all for that question, you know. So if they begin saying L, you write Laura very fast, and rest assured you're going to ace that question type or those type of question types. Okay guys, we've come to the end of our tips and tricks section, and I hope you've understood this section. And rest assured, if you put these tips and tricks in your listening test, then you're going to excel. But as I wind up, I want to remind you, the trick in the listening test is to always read the questions before the audio begins and understand the context of the questions. That is the main trick. And a fast typing or writing speed. Once you understand those 3 things, you're good to go. Okay, class, our next topic is going to be about things to note about your listening test. Some points are going to be repeated through this recording, but if you see something repeated, it means it's very, very important. Okay, class. I hope you've well understood everything we've talked about, and I can't wait to see you in our next class. Bye.